Let me record here. There we go. All
All
right.
right.
So whenever you're ready.
My name is Jennifer Hamilton, and I am a gymnastics coach in Kansas City, Missouri. I found out about PCA through the AAU, and the more I read about it, the more I found out about it, the more I went, oh, that is the way to coach. And growing up in old school gymnastics, when it was the Russian Black Bella Karolyi era, it was very much, strict and hard, and we had weigh-ins and we had very derogatory comments made about our bodies. And having been coaching teenage girls for 30 some years, I I have learned that that is not what's best for kids. And so I really firmly believe in the PCA principles that reinforce the positive mindset, in that reinforce finding the successes in our failures. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today, the Elm Tree of Mastery. The video from Carol was a great transition. So let's start talking about the scoreboard definition of success versus the mastery definition of success. So if, Kelly, can you tell me what you would think the scoreboard definition of success means?
I would just think it would mean whoever wins on the scoreboard is the most successful.
Okay, and what
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Ask that question again.
this, according to the scoreboard definition of success, what does that mean for your athletes?
It means if they lost on the scoreboard that they're losers and they weren't as good as the other team and they should have played better.
All right, Ruben, if we look at the mastery definition of success, what do you think that means to you? As
how
a
good
coach?
you are, how good you are at the sport.
Okay, and what do you think that means to your athletes?
That they're trying to be the best, gymnast or volleyball player or wrestler that they can be.
Even as coaches, it's hard for us to focus on that. And this part of the PCA training hopefully will make it easier for us as coaches to help our athletes focus on that. So when we focus on the mastery definition, like trying to become better athletes, like Ruben did the game, it helps. There's all this research done by Albert Bandura, and if we can go to that slide.
Oh, yeah.
That says feel like they have, or helps athletes feel like they have some control. And when they have more self-control, they will stick to it longer and fight for it harder. Sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize. Let's take a look at another scenario. Your friends, let's look at some other coaching scenarios. The team is playing really tentatively. As a scoreboard coach, you're going to get on them and get really strict. And what would you do? What would you do differently as a mastery coach? Let's try to take that opposite viewpoint. Take a few minutes and just share here with your group, and I'll give you a minute to talk about it at your table, and then pick one person to report back as about how a mastery coach would focus if the team was playing really tentatively.
I picked Billy to share.
All right, Billy, what you got for me?
Well, Jen, I think as a mastery coach, I would focus on all the things that they're doing well, and not, they're probably, the other team's probably bigger and stronger and faster. So I think I would just try to focus them on their skills and, how quick they are, how encouraging they are to each other, how hard they work in the face of adversity, and almost, tell them that they're working harder than they are and give them a little bit of confidence so that they're not focusing on the other team, that they're just focusing on their own game and keeping possession of the ball.
And how does that feel different? How do you think that feels different to them?
Well, I think, what you said before, it's what they can control. And I think sometimes when coaches get on players and they're, scaring them by telling them, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right. I think it's blaming them for the failure. And, nobody likes to play hard when they're being blamed for failure. So I think that when you focus the kids just on what they're doing right, it could help them get a little, I don't know. When I do this with my team, I always talk about possession. Don't worry about scoring. Don't worry about, I said, let's just pretend it's a big game of keep away. And all we're trying to do is keep the ball away from the other team. That's it. Don't worry about what they're doing. Just keep it away. And the one that keeps it away closest to the goal, shoot it in.
That's awesome. And that takes us to our first E in the Elm Tree of Mastery, the effort goals. And effort goals are goals that focus on how, that's one of the few things an athlete can control, is how much effort they put into things. And so when we positively reinforce them as coaches for the effort, not necessarily the success on the scoreboard, that helps them feel like they're more in control. So as a gymnastics coach, 10.0 is the perfect, and all my gymnasts are perfectionists. Perfectionistic girls tend to be drawn toward gymnastics. And so they all want to be perfect. To get them to refocus on not getting that 10.0 and focus on, but you did better than you did at the last meet, and focus on you made this skill and you upped your start value. So all of those things are things that we as coaches can do to help our athletes refocus on their effort as opposed to their successes. So even the worst person on the team still has goals available to them other than just making a basket and finally getting off the bench. How do we as coaches help transition that? Take a minute and talk to your group about what you can do as a coach to help your athletes refocus on that.
I have a quick example. My daughter was a diver, and she didn't like gymnastics. It was scored, and she didn't like diving because she felt like everybody starts with a perfect score and the judges are just there to take points away. So they weren't there to help you get better. They were there to punish you if you didn't do well. And her coach, this is when she was younger, her coach had a really good perspective on it. And she said, if you go up to the diving board and you do the dive correctly, you're going to get a 4. Everything that you do better, you're going to get a higher score. So if you point your toes, you're going to get a 4.5. If you go in straight, you're going to get a 5. If your approach is better, your height is better, you're going to get a 5.3. And so she kind of gave them a breakdown of how if they just do it, it's a 4, and everything that they can control is going to get their score higher and higher. And I liked that, instead of looking at like a 10 is perfect and then dropping the score down for every time they messed up. And I think it really helped.
That's a great example. I really like that one. And helping kids focus on what have we done better, where are we improving, and where can we still put more effort is a great way to look at that. But there are times where we make a mistake as a coach, and there are times when our athletes make a mistake. And we know that kids tend to get really down on themselves. So let's talk about a mistake ritual. That's the second. E is our effort goal. M is our mistake ritual. And there's a lot of different things we can help athletes do to get over those mistakes. One of the things that we do in gymnastics that I do with my gymnasts is talk about flushing it. And I'll just look at them like if they've fallen off the beam, and I'll make this motion with my hand, like flush it away, take a deep breath, get back on. Another one that we do is, they get off the beam and they've fallen twice and they're all in tears. And I ask them about where they're going to park that mistake. What kind of car are you going to park it in? You can take it out and cry all you want in the car on the way home. But right now we need to park it in a car so that we don't get our teammates down, so that we don't affect the next person. So what are some mistake rituals that you currently use in your sport? Let's just pair with the person sitting right next to you and maybe give them one example of a mistake ritual that you use personally as a coach.
We use next page or turn the page.
That's a great one. How about what is the best one that we could teach our athletes? Turn to the person on the other side of you and talk about what's the best ritual you can teach your athletes to move on past those mistakes.
Well, the one I gave, we do teach it to the athletes, and the athletes do it. They if they make a mistake, they say turn the page.
That's great. And it's great that you, Ruben, model that as a coach, because as coaches, we're not perfect. And there are times where we have to say, you know what, I screwed up. I'm going to have to turn the page, learn my lesson from that one, and move on. And the more we verbally process that with them, the easier it is to model that thinking for our athletes. So to help them internalize all of that processing that we'd like to have them do. So those are 3 really good examples of different mistake rituals that we can use. I'm sure there's tons of other ones, and I would love to hear about any that anyone would like to share right at this moment. Anyone have any?
We do Shake It Off with my team. It's a bunch of little girls, and they love Taylor Swift. So they really like the song Shake It Off, and we play it, and then they practice it. And in the beginning of the season, to teach them, like, it's okay when you make a mistake. We're just going to shake it off, and they just shake their hands around and jump around like goofballs, and they like that.
Oh, I love that one. That one's super fun. That would work with a lot of younger kids. What are there any other ones that work with older kids who are too cool for T Swift?
Nobody's ever too cool for T Swift.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. I know my daughter's on the high school lacrosse team right now, and she's a brand new coach, and they just say next. They don't even say next play. They just say next. And that's like their little, when you mess up, the coach just says next. And that's just what they do.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So I kind of went out of order a little bit, EM, and now we're going to talk about L, learning from our mistakes instead of ELM, because I like to think that the learning comes from the mistakes. So when we make a mistake, it's not an opportunity to beat ourselves up. It is an opportunity to move on and learn from it. And that's the third letter in our acronym. So what the Positive Coaching Alliance talks about winning and life lessons. And one of the best life lessons I personally believe, and PCA believes, that we can give our kids is our athletes is learning to move on from those mistakes. So I want y'all to get up and move around the room, find someone that you have not talked to yet, and be super embarrassed and tell them your worst mistake. Or maybe find one that you're comfortable talking about and tell that person your biggest mistake and what you learned from it.
In sports or just in life?
Let's start just in sports. You're not going to have to share it with a large group, just one other person. So go ahead and be brave and put yourself out there.
Do you want us to share it with you now, Jennifer?
Not just yet.
Okay.
Okay, I want everyone to pause just for a moment right now and think about how that feels to share that mistake. What does that feel like? It's pretty uncomfortable, isn't it? And we don't like remembering that we did those things. But now I want you to share with that person what you learned from that mistake, how it's helped you grow as a person. So I'll give you just another minute to talk about that. And whenever you're done, go ahead and go back to your seats. And as everybody sits down again, feel the atmosphere in the room and compare that to how we felt just a few minutes ago when we were having to confess that awful mistake that we did. It was pretty tough, especially to do that in front of people you don't know. Just like it's really difficult for athletes to make a mistake in front of an entire crowd or someone else's parents that they don't know. But being able to learn from that mistake and focus on the takeaway really makes it feel much more positive. So can you tell me right now, Ruben, how you're feeling as opposed to how you were feeling when I asked you to, how you're feeling right at this minute, as opposed when I asked you to go share that mistake with a random stranger?
Well, quite honestly, there's some mistakes that I didn't want to share. Like you said, they make me so uncomfortable to even talk about them. Didn't want to share them. So the one I shared was it didn't make me that uncomfortable, but yeah, but I did like thinking about what I learned from the mistake and how it applies. I actually can apply it to life, so that's good. That feels good.
And you felt a little more proactive and like you had some more control when we make a mistake.
Yeah, I had the control to turn it into a learning opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. So our Elm Tree of Mastery is about giving us the control to learn from our mistakes, about teaching ourselves and our athletes perseverance to persevere through those mistakes, and most importantly, that making mistakes is okay. It is part of the human process, and we only get better if we can improve on the foundation of those mistakes. So do you all have any questions or scenarios that you've been presented with that you maybe struggled with as a coach, or that your athletes struggled with, that we could talk about different approaches? Because the best way is real life situations. And unfortunately, we don't have a team here to help us out with this. So let's talk about some things that we've maybe encountered in our coaching careers. You can just raise your hand.
I think one of the biggest frustrations on my team is when I tell the kids the same thing over and over again, and they make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And as a coach, you tell them about positions, and they constantly are, like, for example, they crowd the ball. When I coach lacrosse, when the ball's on the ground, there's always 20 girls there. And no matter how many times I tell them to spread out, they do the same thing. And it's really hard not to get frustrated.
So how can you, as a coach, help them learn to grow from that continual mistake? What are some things that we could do? Does anyone have any ideas for Kelly?
I would maybe take a different approach to how you teach the skill or the strategy. If the way you're teaching them isn't working and giving you the results you want, then try a different approach. Maybe, yeah.
Have you, that's a great one, Ruben, because there are lots of different approaches that we can take. Kelly, have you found one that's worked yet, or that's been successful for you? Because I can think of one if you'd like to hear one possible PCA approach to this.
No, go ahead.
What if you took one of your players who is a more of a team leader and put them in the coaching spot, and you became that player? And then you ask the player, what are you going to do as a coach? How are we going to fix this? Come on, coach, tell me what to do. What do you think the player would get out of that?
Well, I can think of, if it's the person that doesn't listen to me the most, I think it would be really valuable to make her the coach, because I'm thinking of a couple girls specifically that do not listen. So I think that would be really helpful.
That's awesome.
And I do think that if when you try to teach something, and if you are able to teach something, then you really you know it better than if you've never actually tried to teach it.
Absolutely. Another approach might be to divide the groups into smaller teams, or give them a specific drill and have one person in the group act as a coach while the other players do the drill, and then provide feedback, so that the athlete that's acting as a coach is looking for the mistakes and how to correct them, seeing that we do make them all the time. And it's okay, because there's ways that we can improve from that. So do you guys have any questions about our effort, our learning, or our mastery goals in the Positive Coaching Alliance philosophy? Is there anything that's still unclear? In that case, we're going to go on. We've talked about being connected with our athletes and having our athletes connected with themselves by discussing their emotional tank. We've talked about our mistake rituals, and now we're going to talk about the integrity, honoring the roots of the game.
All right. And you also have the Curtis Granderson video too, just to remind you that that's the end. Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. And it says, just a little FYI, it says on the slide that he plays for the New York Mets, but he actually just changed over to the Toronto Blue Jays. So
all right,
just in case you're doing it, mental note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were very conscious of time. That was a little bit less than 20 minutes. That's great. All right. Ruben, have you seen Jennifer before? Did you see her do her first demo?
More time to talk, because I think we learn more from each other than they would from me.
I mean, I think you did a nice job. I think that I agree with you. I mean, people always learn better, when they're involved. But I think you did a good job of bringing us in and getting us talking. Ruben, I'm sorry, I asked you if you had seen Jennifer before. Did you get a chance to see her the first time?
Yeah. I know. Okay. I've seen Jennifer at least once. In fact, I was trying to flip through my little notebook here to see if I could find Jennifer. I was on one of your previous demos, wasn't I?
You did my interview.
Oh, the audition. Yeah.
The audition.
And then you were in for the last 2 minutes of my last.
Right. Okay, that's what. Okay, yeah, because I'm not finding. Yeah, so I guess this is my first real exposure to Jennifer in a demo. Significant exposure, Kelly.
Okay. All right. Well, I was gonna compare to what she did the last time, but even just starting off fresh, what did you really like that Jennifer did? What were some strengths in what she did, and maybe something that she did or said that stuck with you? And then what are some suggestions that you might have for ways she can improve?
Gosh, there was one phrasing she used, something about, finding success in our failures, finding success in our failures. That got me thinking, that phrase, I don't know, that phrase, I like the phrase, and it got me thinking. Jennifer, I'm a big fan of trainers asking lots of questions, and you certainly asked us a lot of questions. I'll comment a little bit later about the questions themselves, but clearly you were, like you said, giving us an opportunity to hear from each other, talk to each other. We got to talk to each other a lot. So that stood out to me also.
I think some of the questions I didn't phrase as clearly as I wanted to. Sometimes my brain gets going faster than my mouth. And I just have to slow down and go back and think about, what am I trying to say here? What do I want to get out of it?
Yeah. And that's what these practice sessions are for also. I mean, they're for us to see you, but they're also for you to practice. Like, wait, that didn't come out right. Or I've asked a question in a workshop before and everybody looks at you and I'm like, wait, can somebody else repeat what I was trying to say? Because obviously it didn't come out right. So I think it's just a matter of practicing and getting this. The more simple you can keep a question, the better. I often say, if you imagine that you're talking to a room full of first graders when you ask a question, obviously not intelligence wise, but phrasing of questions wise, you're going to be fine. You'll catch the whole gamut of people.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. Sorry, Ruben, go ahead.
So speaking of questions, I have a question for you, Jennifer. When we got to the scoreboard mastery slide, back up a little, Kelly. Thank you.
Yep.
When we got to this slide, you asked us, what do we think scoreboard definition? What do you think mastery is? And we answered those questions, and you moved forward to the next slide.
Okay.
So go ahead and move forward, Kelly. And then you moved us forward. You moved us forward again.
Right.
Gosh, yeah. And then you did the scenario, and keep going, Kelly. Okay. And so this is where you actually talked about Elm, Jennifer. This is where you told us about Elm, and that was. I just was wondering why you broke down Elm here, as opposed to on the slide that actually has the. I was just wondering if that was by design or if it was by accident, or.
I kind of think I guess it was a little bit by design and a little bit by accident. I mean, I kind of when you have the introductory transition slide, it talks about, we're going to talk about Elm. And I know that we've touched about it in the introduction. So I wanted to put the 3 pieces, at least get a little bit of the pieces in there so that there's more significance to those 3 letters in the acronym, and then look at them in more detail. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think that also it's possible that the way you structured that folks might have had a difficulty understanding why it was Elm. Mm-hmm. You talked about effort, and then you talked about mistakes, and then you went to learning. So
okay, yeah,
I don't know. I think my suggestion for you to think about is on this slide. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but hitting the effort, learning, and mistakes are okay on this slide, even if it's just briefly, and then you go into more detail later, and making the connection that's why it's Elm. Because you'd be surprised. Some people, you talk about effort, learning, and mistakes, and they never make the connection to Elm, the acronym. So that's one thought I have. And another thought I have is with the questions, Jennifer, is I think you want to ask provocative questions that do get us thinking. And you want to be careful about asking questions that are difficult for us to answer. Or, I think most people don't know a lot about mastery. Most of the coaches we get in front of don't know a lot about mastery and haven't, studied this. And so asking what does a mastery definition mean before you've introduced it, I think that's going to be tough for a lot of people. Another thing about questions is if you ask questions where you expect us to answer in a certain way, like I thought you asked me a question. How did you feel the second time when you turned your mistake into, I forget the exact question.
When you said what you learned from your mistake.
Yeah. I think that was a question that I was supposed to answer a certain way, and I was supposed to feel a certain way, and I wasn't feeling it. So, I mean, the mistake that I had chosen and chosen to share did not make me feel uncomfortable, Okay. But I think I was supposed to feel uncomfortable sharing the mistake. And then I was supposed to feel relieved or comfortable. Anyway, so that's the thing about asking questions that we're supposed to answer a certain way. It's a little awkward for me because I wasn't feeling, I think I sensed that I'm supposed to say something, but it's actually not what I'm feeling. So anyway, I'm just sharing that with you.
Phrased it as being like a rhetorical question. Just think about how
maybe
the opposed who may or may not have felt uncomfortable sharing your mistake versus what we learn from our mistakes. Because I think it does change the feeling of the team and the coaches and the athletes when we look at our successes. I think it does make us feel more empowered and positive, as opposed to when we're looking just at our mistakes, we're really uncomfortable.
And the success in that case was that I had made a mistake and learned something from it. Okay. All right, Kelly, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks. I just have a couple notes, Jennifer. I think this principle was a little tougher for you than the first one. I thought your introduction, it was very natural and it was very smooth. And I felt like this one, you were kind of tripping up a little bit. And I only think that because I think you've got a lot of passion for PCA, and I think you have a lot of experience and knowledge, and you were trying to add in more than was needed. So when I say keep it simple, like this principle, as Ruben said, is new for people. This used to be our first principle, because it's such a cool concept. It's non-controversial in sports psychology research. Nobody's going to argue with you about any of this, but there's a lot of aha moments that come up. So if you try to add in like feelings and what do you learn, all this like other extra stuff, I think it muddies the waters a little bit. And I don't think you need it. I think you've got enough conviction and presence and authority when you're speaking about this that you don't need to add in extras. That being said, we always say, you don't have to stay strictly tied to the PowerPoint, which I really appreciate that you don't, click and vomit and read every single slide. I think that's a really great asset that you have. But as Ruben said, some of them you actually do need to. And this one with the chart is one of them because that sets the tone. The other thing is that, and I should have, of course, I'm flushing it. I should have actually had you start right here because this is the transition from Emotional Tank into Elm Tree of Mastery. And so when I gave you the choice afterwards, I thought I shouldn't have given you the choice. I should have had you start here because this is the transition from Emotional Tank where you are talking about feelings and you are talking about the kids, performance when they have a full tank, switching over to effort. And this video by Carol Dweck has so much stuff in it, really rich information. And the videos are supposed to be a springboard to get us to start thinking. So if you're ready for this, it's not just like, oh, here's a video from Carol Dweck, let's move on to the next slide. It's what did she say that resonated with you? Did anything she say make your, brain go off and go, wow, I never thought of that. So that is the importance of the video. And then the next slide is really, as I'm pushing through. Okay. So Carol just told us that we need to, focus on effort in order to get athletes to get better. How do we do that? Well, we know we need to focus on effort. We need to tell them. We need to notice it, and we need to attribute the success to effort. What does that look like as coaches on the field? This is what it looks like. Instead of saying you're a great soccer player, you're a great gymnast, you say something like, that was a great play. You've really been working hard in practice. So you're attributing the success to the work and effort. So this is such a crucial part of mastery because it totally sets the stage. Then to transition that into, okay, this brings us right into our third principle, the Elm Tree of Mastery. Elm is another acronym. What does that look like? Well, here's as simple as it is. There's two different ways you can measure success: on the scoreboard and on mastery, meaning your effort and skills. So if, and I do this a different way too. I don't know if you've heard me say, but I actually get two people up in the front of the room to give a halftime speech. And one of you is a scoreboard focused coach. Your only focus is on results, comparing your team to the other team, and that every mistake you make is not okay. And the other person volunteer I get to come up, you're going to focus on mastery. And while I'm explaining this activity to the coaches, I'm actually teaching the rest of the people in the group. So
I like that. I like that a lot.
You coach, the mastery definition coach, your idea of success is how much effort is your team giving? How much have they learned? And when they make a mistake, are they learning from it? So even though it's kind of like I'm just teaching the exercise, the other group is like, okay, I get this. And then I say, okay, you have 30 seconds. You're down by one goal or 1 point, or you're down. You've got to motivate your team. You give your 30-second speech. You give your 30-second speech. I do this for athlete workshops. I do it for coach workshops. And it's really, I've done it about 10 times. I've never had a coach that hasn't really dramaed it up and made it really fun, especially the win at all cost scoreboard focused coach. I mean, sometimes their faces are red and they're screaming and they're yelling and, what are you guys thinking? This isn't the team I coached, and then you get the mastery definition, the mastery focused coach to give his halftime speech, and the whole demeanor is more positive. And I didn't tell them to do that. It just, you can see they're focusing on, wow, you guys came out and you played really hard. I love the way that you got back on defense. As soon as you lost that ball, the rebounding has been great, whatever it is. And then I debrief by turning it to the coaches and say, which one would you rather play for? Which one would motivate you to go out there in the second half and play harder? And then, I kind of blip in there too about, does this intimidating win at all cost yelling, screaming coach, does that motivate some? And I think it's good to put that in there because fear is a motivator. Fear is a really effective motivator, but the downside of that too. So having this slide up for a little bit of time, it takes time to soak it in because you'll see a lot of aha moments where coaches go, wow, I'm focusing a lot more on the scoreboard than I should be. And, I also give value to the scoreboard. The scoreboard is a tool. We use it to measure success. It's not that the scoreboard's not important, but there's a way to get the kids to the mastery that the scoreboard will improve. They will do better. It's all about performance. So I'll stop talking. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to confess, I picked this one because I knew it would be the hardest one for me to articulate, and it would be the principle that I would stumble over the most.
That's exactly what you should do. I love that growth mindset.
That's great,
Way to
Jennifer.
go. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you know, this is one of those principles that if you understand it and you do it well, it'll be your favorite. We have a whole workshop that we do on mastery. It's a 90-minute workshop just on mastery. And it's new, but it's now one of my favorites. I absolutely love it. But I remember tripping over this for a while too, because I wasn't focusing on the right thing. I wasn't focusing on having these coaches really coach for mastery so that their performance would improve, because it's all about performance. And this is what the research has shown, not even just the research, but also the best practices of the coaches that we've talked to. The ones that are having the most success are coaching with a mastery focus. So that was just my 2 bits about that. The other thing that I do like your transitions. I think you do a nice job transitioning from one slide to the other. So it is very smooth. I thought that was really great. The questioning part, I wrote down something about the questioning too, just like Ruben said. Again, I think you were just confusing the questions. I think they're very simple questions when you even asked about I liked the scenario when you asked, how would a scoreboard focused coach handle this scenario versus a mastery coach? I thought that was a great question. And especially, you know, the exercise that I did on top of that or behind, you know, before that, if you did something like that, this is a great scenario to talk about that. So I really like the way you did that. But then this slide, this is the tools. So every principle has the theory, the research, and then the tools. So this slide right here is not where you explain, this is L, this is E, this is L, this is M, because you've already done that. This is the slide where you say, okay, coaches, you're always asking, what can I do? Here they are. Everything that, you know, and that you've already told them this before, everything that flies across the screen in yellow, those are the tools. This is where you're going to go out and put these in your pocket. So what do? We focus on effort. We know that. Assertive aggressive play comes when there's no fear of mistakes. These are the takeaways. So how do we do it? Well, we become a noticer. Open up to page 27 in your book. You know, get them in the book. Open up to page 27. Show them that, wow, look at this. Starting on page 21, chapter 4, there are just tools and tools and tools. I think there's 9 of them. Look at all these things you can do to have your team focus on mastery. Like, this is amazing. We'll just talk about 2 of them, mistake ritual and rewarding unsuccessful effort. So this is where you get out the book and you have them, you know, this is what you're taking home. This is what you're going to do on the field tomorrow, in the gym, in the court. This is it. And then the ending is just Curtis Granderson. So I think if you've got the order of things in your head, it makes it a little bit easier. You're not trying to teach theory on this slide. Like, you were trying to teach the theory behind Elm Tree of Mastery on the tools. That's not the time to teach theory. That's the time to say, okay, and talk about this in your sport. What sport do you coach? Well, I coach gymnastics. Okay, what's a time that an athlete, a gymnast, has totally messed up? Maybe it's a floor routine. Maybe it's beam. But what has she done well before that? Yeah, she fell off the beam, but what did she do well before that? You know, in swimming, yeah, they false started, but what did they do? You know, something like that. In soccer, he might have hit the ball all the way over the net, but he got open. He had to beat his defender. You know, get these out of the coaches, and that's what we're rewarding. Not the fact that he sailed the ball over the net, but the fact that he took a shot at all. The fact that he beat his defender. The fact that he finally locked his ankle when I wanted him to kick. So just get examples when you're doing tools. Get examples, because that's what the coaches will remember when they leave a workshop. Yeah, so I think, you know, as I said, the only comments I put was take the feeling out of it for Elm Tree, because I don't think mistake ritual is about feeling. I think it's literally, it's a physical sign that will trigger in your head an instant reset. And that's what we want. We want the players to put the mistake behind us so that we'll reset and move on. We're hoping it's going to make them feel better. But when you asked me that question, I was still feeling bad. Like, I screwed up a volleyball serve at the end of a game and we lost the championship. And this was 6 months ago, and I'm an adult and I'm still upset because I tried to jump serve, which I shouldn't have done. It was the championship game, the last serve, and I screwed it up. And I was, you know, they still took me out for a beer, so I'd feel better. But personally, I felt like I lost the game for my team. So when you said a mistake, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I lost that last serve, you know? So I just think, you know, I wasn't feeling any better. And what did I learn from it? I shouldn't have tried a new serve as the last serve in a really important game, you know, but I'm still pissed. I'm still not feeling any better about it. And there is no next play. It was the last game. There's no next play. So anyway, I think I would love to see you do another principle. I'd love to see you do honoring the game or emotional tank, just because, you know, think about structure. Think about pulling in stories, have the tools be tools, have the questions be clear, And I think, you know, it's going to all come together to be fantastic. It just takes a little practice.
Hey, Kelly.
Okay.
Kelly,
Yeah.
earlier you mentioned keeping it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Had you given Jennifer that feedback? Had you used that phrase before with Jennifer? Were you
I don't
referring
know.
back to? Oh,
I'd have to
okay.
look back in my notes.
Okay.
I tell everybody that. That's
I was
not
just
just Jennifer
wondering.
specific.
I was just wondering, you know, Jennifer, a couple folks I've worked with recently, you being one of them, I do feel that for right now, you guys are trying to do too much with this, and you know, and you know, it's so tricky, Jennifer, because there's the balance between being robotic, too slide focused, but allowing the workshop to be organic. And, you know, I think I do think that this demo would have benefited from a little simpler approach, and yeah, a little, not necessarily reading bullet points and stuff, but a little simpler approach, because, you know, although Kelly points out a good about how the Carol Dweck video, and there's a slide that actually come before we actually get into the principle itself. For the most part, the slides and bullet points are designed with a lot of thought in terms of flow and order. And let me point something out here. Kelly, can you go back? Can you go back a couple slides? Can you go back to the mastery and scoreboard slide?
This one? Yep.
Yeah. So in the old days, Jennifer, in the old days, this is back when we had overhead projectors and transparencies.
Wow.
Those days, Ruben.
Yeah, yeah. And so we would put more on one transparency because we didn't want to have 200 transparencies, you know. So bullet points. So Kelly, go ahead and fill this in. So this was on the top of the slide. Okay, now go to the next slide. And then below it was, you know, it was a little bit separated, but below it was this point. And then go forward. And then it finished with this. This was all on one transparency. And it was meant to flow together. So if you go back, Kelly, again, I'm sorry I'm making you do all this clicking.
No worries.
So you know, the comparing scoreboard and mastery and explaining why it's ELM, E-L-M, then led into the next point, which was research shows that when athletes focus on mastery, they're less nervous, they're more confident. And why is that? It's because focusing on the mastery side puts their focus on things they can control. It gives them this feeling of control. And when they have that feeling of control, they work harder, they stick to it long. So, you know, it's meant to have a flow. So I don't know if that helps or if I'm just, you know, if we're overwhelming you here, Jennifer.
Her head's going to
explode. Yeah. But
I'll tell you one
I
more
guess
trick.
the main
One more
point I
trick
want to
before
make
I
is, you know, the PowerPoint is designed to help organize and simplify. I guess that's my main point.
I think for me, I'm a very kinesthetic learner, so this helps me more than anything. But having the PowerPoint larger in the background, since I'm like visually would help me. Next time I'll set another.
So Jennifer, what, you know, you're breaking up there. Maybe you cannot. What you're saying is that you actually weren't following the PowerPoint when you were taking us through this.
I was. Little tiles there. I cannot physically. A little blue screen with some words on it.
Did you click on it to make it bigger? Because if you click on it, it makes it bigger on your screen.
I did, but it didn't. 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 It didn't like it didn't.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well, whichever way. I mean, I think, for the next time, you can have it up however you want. You can have it as, some people like print them out and have it as notes next to. This is more just for you to, go through it. But yeah, I mean, we obviously know that it's better for you to be in front of live people with a huge screen behind you and doing it. Again, this is just practice for language and questioning. And a lot of the recommendations that Ruben and I are giving you are based on our experience when we are in front of live people. This is how you would translate what you're trying to do versus that. Mm-hmm. And just to let you know too, we're not usually this picky with a lot of people because because I mean, honestly, I think the better you are and the more potential you have, the more picky we are with you. And, I really do. Like there's some people that do this the first time and we're like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, here's a couple suggestions. Try the next time. It's really the stronger people that we're most picky with because we can actually see you out there doing this in front of live people and being really effective. And we want you to be as strong as you can possibly be. And, just knowing you briefly, I think that I can tell that you are trying to improve and you're trying to get better. So, a lot of the things we're telling you are to translate from Google Hangout to live coaches. This is what you're going to need to do in a live workshop.
So Kelly, in the spirit of understanding and in the spirit of keeping things simple, could you tell Jennifer and me in the next demo that she's going to do, if you were to try to simplify what you're hoping to see from her in that next demo, or what you encourage her to try in the next demo, how would you say that? How would you summarize that?
I'm confused at your question.
Okay. What do we want to see from Jennifer next time?
I just want to see, I mean, if you choose honoring the game, I think honoring the game is a great principle to do for a demo because it's the end of the workshop. So we've already seen you do the beginning and one of the principles, and I like to see you do the end. And I would just like to see you, do it as closely as if you were going to be doing it at a live workshop as possible. Keeping it within the time frame just to keep the pace moving, keeping it interactive, but using the honoring the game principle doesn't have very many slides. So I think that's a good one to do too, because you can, the slides you're not stuck to the slides because there aren't very many. So that's what I would like to see. I would just like to see it be clear and simple and get the coach's experience involved to help illustrate the principle.
Okay.
All right.
Is that what you would have said? Yeah. The other thing, just to let you know too, if you have, and I don't want to muddy the waters anymore, but when I do this principle, I take this slide. Where is it? Right here. This is my intro to the principle. I have this slide, then I have the Carol Dweck video, then I have the question, because I think it's a transition slide. So, it's just something personally that I do. Not everybody does it, but I just think it's easier to go right from emotional tank. Okay, now we're going to move into principle 2. I would love you to hear from one of the experts in the field, Dr. Carol Dweck. And that's just my own preference, but there is no worries with changing the order of a couple slides if it works a little bit better for your approach. So, okay. All right. I think we've inundated you enough.
I limited myself to one Post-it of tips that I took away from.
Well, good. Well, this is recorded too, so feel free to go back and watch it. You're the only one, we'll send it to you, so you can go back and watch. And it's always fun to go back and watch yourself. I'm sure you're going to be more critical than we are.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and I will. I'll shoot you an email about when I'll be ready to do the next one.
Okay, fantastic. And we have time too. There aren't a lot of workshops in Kansas City right now. It's going to be coming, but there aren't a lot right now. So it's not like we have this rush to get you out there because there's just not a lot of action yet in Kansas City. But it'll be great when it does.
I'd like to get out there and do some promoting and help get a chapter started here, because I think it well, actually, our teams to work with. Positive, proactive, community-involved team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, I think one of the first workshops is tomorrow in Kansas. I already told you about that one, but I think that's one of the biggest workshops in Kansas City.
I'm going to jump off, guys.
Yep, I'm going to go too. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
There is one tomorrow in Kansas City? There's one Saturday.
Isn't that tomorrow? Oh my gosh, you're right. I'm sorry. Saturday. Yes.
Okay.
I'm thinking it's Friday already. That's pretty bad.
It's Tuesday, Kelly.
Oh my goodness, I need help. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.